Hey there, my beautiful overachieving business mamas. Welcome to the Moxie Movement, where we're tearing down myths and propelling women like you to success, both in business and at home. I'm Sarah Greener, your guide on this journey, because I've walked this tightrope too, and together we're here to help redefine what success looks like. Dive in for real talk, actionable steps, and a community that gets the hustle of juggling motherhood, wife life, and that entrepreneurial drive. It's time for a little Moxie. Welcome back to the Moxie Movement, and you have one very excited podcast host here this week because I learned to ride a scooter. I'm feeling very, very pleased with myself. We living on an island in Thailand called Koh Lanta. Years and years ago, when I was in my 20s, we lived in Thailand. My husband Johnny was here for about 8 years. I was here for about 4. Where we lived, I walked everywhere. And when we went into town, I used to take the local buses, which are basically just a ute with a roof over the top and some bench seats to get around. And then when I met my boyfriend, now husband, I used to go with him on the back of the motorbikes or the scooters around the towns, but I'd never learnt to do it myself for a variety of different reasons. I grew up in a big farm. I'd ridden motorbikes, mostly four-wheelers. I'd had the odd go on a two-wheeler, but I wasn't super confident. Dad always had a rule that if you couldn't lift the motorbike off yourself, you couldn't drive it. The bigger bikes were not something we were allowed on. And so I'd had a couple of goes on and those sorts of things, but the whole concept, the idea of driving it on the roads in Thailand, where I didn't necessarily know the road rules, couldn't read all the signs, and had heard all sorts of horror stories and seen all sorts of horror stories of people having accidents on them, I just never did it. And I had a way of getting around without it. I was pretty sure a couple of years back when we went to Indonesia that I was going to have to learn, but it was all right because we could still fit the 3 of us on one scooter because Scarlett was a bit shorter then and it was okay. She's getting significantly taller now, mostly because of Johnny, because he's 6'5". Definitely not the tall genes coming from me. It always cracks me up when I meet up with my clients. They're like, oh, you're smaller in real life than you look on the video, on the Zoom. I'm like, okay, I'll take that. I think you're just tall. It's not me that's short. The tall genes don't come from me. They come from Johnny. And we can see that it's going to be a little challenging for the 3 of us to be on the bike long term. My days of being a wind-blown, wind-swept passenger princess on the back of the scooters, those days are over. And it was either going to be me learning to ride a bike or her. She's very keen. Scarlett's very keen to learn to ride a scooter. I'm less keen that she learns. In fact, I would prefer it that she never learned to drive, and if we could just hurry up with the whole self-driving cars thing, that would be awesome as a parent. I don't have to teach her to drive. I suspect we're going to have to teach her to drive. But anyway, it was me, not her. And Johnny was going to teach me to drive, but if you're in a significant relationship, you know that having your significant other teach you something is always challenging. Our friend Frase rode to the rescue and said, I'll teach you. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, cool, we'll schedule that. And he was like, oh, I've got some time now before lunch. I was like, oh, I had no wiggle room. I had no clients booked in, nothing that I had to be doing. And I was like, damn it, I'm not going to get out of this. We went down and I learnt to ride the bike around and around in a circle, going at the speed of a grandmother on an electrical mobility scooter. Not very fast, but I felt very impressed by myself. And then I went round in the other direction as well, just to make sure I could turn both left and right. Very pleased with myself this week. I conquered a fear. I have learnt to ride a scooter. We could call it a motorbike, but it's a stretch. It's like a 125cc scooter here in Thailand. Explored the island with my family, had a lot of fun, felt very proud of myself, right up until my husband did an impersonation of me driving the scooter, and then I realised I really did look a little bit like a nana on a mobility scooter, but that's okay. I was having a brilliant time. I had a lot of fun. We explored all the islands, and I feel very comfortable getting myself about. I've got my independence back, and when Johnny needs to go back to New Zealand to do the maintenance on the boat in September, Scarlett and I will be able to stay on here because I'll be able to get us around. Next stage, watch the space. I've got to learn how to ride the motorbike with Scarlett on the back. I hear she's a very good passenger. We will go back to said park and tootle around in a circle with me driving and Scarlett on the back over the next few weeks that she can do it. I'm feeling pretty stoked. Turns out I can still do hard things. Turns out there are still new experiences for me to have, even in a country that I lived in for quite a few years, and loving the experience of seeing the world through our daughter's eyes. It's a really interesting thing when you travel, especially when you go back to a place that you were at. Oh, this is going to age me 20 years ago. We were here 20 years ago, just about. Is that right? Yeah, close. Things have changed dramatically. Like the island that we're on, the roads were dirt when we were here last time. There was a lot less buildings. There was a lot less villas. There was a lot less just infrastructure in general. The power went off more often than we were 20 years ago. Things have changed. I'm always worried that when I go back to a place that I've been to a long time ago, I'm going to spend the whole time comparing and judging it and finding it wanting. The cool thing about having Scarlett with us is everything's new to her. Although she's been to Thailand before when she was really small, she hasn't been when she could recognise it and explore it. Everything is new through her eyes. Every new flavour is new. Every experience is new, and it's super fun because when you look at the world through your children's eyes for the first time, you are much more curious, you're so much more playful. Travel with a 12-year-old is very cool. I learned to ride a motorbike, and I'm stoked with myself. I was also reminded that in Thailand we like to live dangerously when it comes to the power supplies. We don't believe in grounding our power supplies, apparently, here in Thailand. It's just a two-pronged plug that goes in. Everything has a slight buzz to it, literally. Johnny picked up my cable for my iPhone the other day and touched the metal end and got a little sting, a little prick, a little reminder. And my microphone for podcasting, every now and then it starts to like buzz with the energy. Every now and then the computer buzzes a little bit with the energy. We've put in a power protector for the computer and system. But I am very much reminded that in Thailand we don't have a grounding peg. You know, in New Zealand we have the power plugs that have 3 and one of them is the ground. We don't have that here. Being a bit more mindful around how we're plugging in, how we're using electric things, and definitely not touching the metallic pieces of our machinery unless we have to. It's not a big shock, it's just a little tinkle. But yeah, we definitely like to live dangerous here in Thailand. One of the things that's really smacked us in the face this time that back in New Zealand we talked about, we saw it on the internet, we've done a little bit of travelling over the last couple of years. I don't think we had really seen the impacts of humans on the environment until we got here. I've seen people talk about microplastics. I've seen people talk about the plastic problem. You know, it washes out, it washes in. Every now and then in the Bay of Islands on a boat, we'll have a storm that comes from a certain direction and a beach will get a whole lot of rubbish on it, plastic and all sorts of other things that has been washed in from out at sea. It doesn't happen super often. You'll see it every now and then. We're here in the low season. There are some significant prevailing winds coming up onto one coast of the island, and with that is coming a lot of plastic and a lot of rubbish. We went for a walk, sunset walk on the beach, and it is the first time I have experienced in-person microplastics. Actually seen them on the beach. I've heard everyone talk about them. I've heard all the stats around the fish eat them and then we eat them, and we're consuming, like, I think my daughter said to me the other day, like a credit card worth of microplastics. I think she said every year, but she might have said every month. Don't quote me on that, but that's a lot. I've heard all this stuff and gone, yeah. But to see it in real life, it was a real smack in the face. It was probably the first time I really felt a little hopeless about what we've done to the planet and can we fix it? And it's probably the first time I really thought, do we have enough time to unwind this in a way that's going to be okay for our children? I was a bit demoralised by it. I think in New Zealand we're a bit, yes, there's rubbish on the beach. I've got a client and a friend who, she goes down and she picks stuff up every day. Certainly when we walked along the beach in Paihia, we'd pick stuff up, but this was significant. We went down and did a beach cleanup. We were down there for 4 hours. And we could have kept going. Like, honestly, we spent so much time in just this small area of the beach and I still didn't feel like it was cleaned up. It was significantly better, but it was a big job and I have no idea. Like, you're there and you can't pick up the microplastics. So this week's kind of been a mixed bag. It's been a beautiful adventure and a little bit of a wake-up call that in the Bay of Islands in New Zealand, we've been a little bit sheltered from the damage that has been done, I think. And I am less, for the first time, I think, less hopeful than I have been around that situation. I see all these amazing people doing this cool stuff, but I really do think unless we significantly change the way that, one, we consume, and two, the way that we do business, which you and I can help with, yeah, I worry for our future after seeing that. I knew it was out there. I didn't think it was a made-up thing. There is something incredibly powerful about seeing it with your own eyes. I have a daughter who is passionate about all this stuff. She wants to be someone who removes all the plastic from the oceans, which is just a super cool goal. And we've always talked about it, and she's talked about the things that she wants to do to help with that. And I've always been really excited about that for her. I think it's a really cool impact that she wants to make. And this was kind of this first moment where I went, oh, that we've got a big job ahead of ourselves. And as humans, collectively, we've got a huge amount of work to do. This wasn't rubbish from Thailand. Some of this rubbish was from Malaysia and India. And, the currents moving the mess that we make around, and what we do in our backyard is no longer just impacting our backyard. I think as individuals and as business owners, we're going to have to make some significant changes. So, yeah, a mixed bag. I guess the first one and the last one merge together, and that, we can do hard things. And yes, this is going to be a hard thing to clean up. This is going to be a hard thing to change. We've got habits that we've had for many, many years, and we're going to have to change them. Already, as a family, we're kind of looking at some of the things that we do and we purchase, and how can we change it? Even our buying habits here, because they use a lot of plastic bags. How can we think about changing our behaviours? It's not huge, but there are some things that we can do that mean that we're not adding to that at this point in time. It's small, but it helps. This week, I want to chat about how old I am. I know, that feels like a random topic to be talking about on a business podcast. Unless, of course, like me, you're somewhere between 35 and 55 and you're female. Because if you are in that age bracket, there's every chance that you are going through this journey of perimenopause and menopause. And if you're anything like me, you'd heard about the hot flushes. You might have heard about some night sweats. But that's about as far as it went. That's about as far. I think the really interesting thing for me was that while I have heard about hot flushes and night sweats, I hadn't really heard about anything else. The logarithms clearly knew I was in my 40s and started serving me up the people that are talking on the internet now about perimenopause and menopause. And I want to talk to you a little bit about my journey, because while I had heard a little bit about those two most popular symptoms, I hadn't experienced any of them. I thought I was way too young to be having any of these challenges with my hormones. And the truth of the matter was, probably for the last 18 months, I have been negatively impacted by significant symptoms of my hormone levels beginning to change. And I'm having this conversation more and more often in my communities. And I don't think we talk about it enough. I think there are more people talking about it more than ever before, thank goodness. And I want to talk today specifically about the journey that I've been on and the impact that it's had on my business. Because when you're the leader in your organization, when you run a team, when you support a whole lot of clients or customers, there are a lot of balls you have in the air anyway. And there's a lot of pressure, and you're probably pretty high performing, all right? You have a great brain. You're really good at problem solving. You're really good at getting through stuff. You've probably had some really busy, stressful periods in your life. And when I started going through this, I was like, I'm struggling with basic things. Things like, I know I left the house and I locked the door, and I went out and I drove the car. I clearly have the keys with me, But for the life of me, I cannot find where I've put them in the car, in my handbag, in my pockets. I've been backwards and forwards from the door 5 times, and I still can't get into the house. To the point where I had to go looking for the spare key that I could get inside. And on a couple of occasions, I broke in through the cat door. Small confession there. I didn't recognise that this change in life was actually going to have a really big impact on my brain, which the fact that we play an intellectual game of business was really significant. Now that I look back in hindsight, I can see a lot of the symptoms and when they were showing up, only because I've now got some support to reduce said symptoms. For me, I probably didn't notice it. I think it was a slow, gradual decline of my estrogen and my progesterone levels. I didn't really notice things drastically. I didn't have significant physical issues. I didn't have night sweats. I didn't have hot flushes. But what I did have was real trouble sleeping. And the last time I had trouble sleeping like that was back when I was working those 100-hour weeks and I was drinking a lot of caffeine and I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was finding that I was awake like a shot at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, heart racing, intrusive thoughts, anxiety, like off the charts. Like, what the hell? What has scared me in this pitch dark, quiet, peaceful night that my heart is racing like a freaking tiger's chasing me? That's how I was waking up in the night. And then, of course, because there was such adrenaline coursing through my body, I was not going back to sleep until about 4:30. And I get up early in the morning to work out, and then my alarm would go off at 5 and I'd be up and ready for the day. I was getting very disrupted sleep, which was amplified by this kind of heart racing, these thoughts that were showing up, just really challenging. The only other physical symptom that I remember, other than the racing heart piece, was sore hips. And I kept putting that down to exercise that I was doing at the gym. I thought maybe I'd injured something, went to the physio for 6 months. Not once did anybody ever say, oh, that like joint pain and stuff is a symptom of going through perimenopause and you're about that age, maybe you should look at it. Those were the first things that I had. And then I really started to struggle with my confidence. I do lots of things that I find uncomfortable, and I always have managed to work through them and figure it out. But I was finding myself backing away more and more often from these challenges, and that was making things difficult for me. My head was foggy. I've always been someone that's been able to find all my words really quickly and race through stuff, but I was losing my words. I would go halfway through a sentence and then lose my train of thought. I found myself asking my clients, what was I talking about? I could get myself back on track. I was really struggling with the brain part of this journey. And other than the reels and things that were being served up to me online, I had never really had anyone say anything about these sorts of things. Then I jumped on a call with a business friend and we were chatting about something completely unrelated to my brain health and my body health. And this person had recently been diagnosed with ADHD. And she said to me, oh, you're ADHD. And I went, I don't think I am. Thanks. Like, not that I think it's a problem, but no, I'm in my 40s. I would have known by now if that was who I was, that I had that neurodiversity, and I would have known. I've always had some anxiety. It's a bit triggered at the moment. I'm responding with a lot more anxiety at the moment than I anticipated. She said, oh, okay. She said, oh, what? That often high-performing women that have been really successful in careers and businesses, when they start to go through perimenopause, they are diagnosed with neurodiversities. They have been able to regulate, work around the symptoms. So I'm like, oh, okay. And I guess it lodged in the back of my brain, and I did some research, and the problems just got worse and worse. And most of them were brain things. It really reached a peak when I was running my client event in November last year, and I just walked into the room, into the venue, and it didn't feel good. The space felt wrong. I was worried about all the things that could possibly go wrong, that were unlikely to go wrong. I was constantly having to write things down, put alarms in my calendar to remember things. I was crying on the daily, every day, over ridiculous things. Obviously not at the event, but I certainly would get home at night and cry, and I would certainly have a cry before I got started in the morning. And really struggling to regulate around things, particularly my poor husband. If he was breathing, if he was chewing, there were definitely some murderous thoughts, and he was doing nothing out of the ordinary. There was a whole lot of this brain stuff going on that I was really struggling with, but I couldn't tell you why. After the event in November, I started to go downhill quite drastically, quite quickly. And it was to do with the brain fog. It was to do with my inability to focus. It was to do with my inability to get projects done, to the point that it was impacting my team. And because of that, I lacked the confidence to do things. I was losing my motivation to build my business, to support my clients. I was really struggling with my memory. I was struggling to regulate my emotions. Definitely not sleeping well, which was making everything worse. Turns out all of those things impacted by your hormone levels, which should be unsurprising to us. Body and brain connections are important. I really struggled through the end of last year. I was showing up and doing all the things, and I think that's the one thing that I want to really highlight, is that if you're someone who's high performing normally, you're probably going to push through. You're probably going to keep doing all the things you need to do in your business, serving your customers, serving your clients, looking after your team at that day-by-day level. And you probably know underlying that you're not performing the way that you were. You're not able to cope with things that 6 months ago, 12 months ago, that you could cope with really well. I then ended up going to the GP and saying, hey, I think this is what's going on, and I think potentially there's I need to go and do some work around neurodiversity as well, potentially, because that would explain much. And my GP went, yep, you could do this. No mention of HRT, none of that stuff. And I was like, I heard that HRT maybe can help me with this stuff. And she was like, yeah, maybe you live a really busy, stressful life. And in the back of my head, I'm going, I have lived a really busy, stressful life. I know what that looks like. I have worked 60 to 100 hours a week, and it did not feel like this. Yes, there were times when I was stressed. Yes, there were times I was anxious. Yes, there were times when I was depressed, but this is different, and something is not right. So I said, great. Can I get a referral, or do I need to go privately to go and get a diagnosis or get an assessment for, do I have a neurodiversity? And she's like, oh, you'll probably need to go private. Like, the wait list is years long if you're going to go through the public system. I did. And then really struggled to get on past the wait list processes. Again, like a focus, inability to do very simple tasks that normally I'd have no problem doing, filling out forms, responding to emails, and like just really normal stuff for someone who has run businesses for 20 years. I was struggling with it. And finally got around to booking in an appointment, talked to the psychiatrist, had the conversation about ADHD. I will do another episode on that at another date and time, because that has been a complete journey as well for me. But one of the things that he said was, as hormone levels drop off, it impacts the dopamine receptors, it amplifies the ADHD symptoms. All of the things you're experiencing are perimenopause symptoms, and they're amplified by the fact that you're also undiagnosed ADHD. All of it together is creating this mess. And I was like, okay. He wrote his report, and one of the things he recommended was HRT to manage the symptoms of perimenopause and obviously the symptoms of the neurodiversity. Back to the GP and asked, and they were like, oh, we need to check your hormone levels, and it's a lot to prescribe at your age. You just have a really busy life. At this point, I had steam coming out of my ears. I am more than capable of knowing what's going to work and what's not going to work for my body. And I should have been offered HRT 6 months earlier, back in November, when I came in with all very clear symptoms of perimenopause, and I wasn't. I had to push and fight. I had to go away to a psychiatrist to get a diagnosis of ADHD and a recommendation to do HRT, which he could then not prescribe because he's a psychiatrist, not a GP. And then I had to come back, and I still had to push with my GP to get the HRT. Got the HRT, put the patch on Monday. I didn't really notice too much the first few days. By Thursday, I popped out of bed at 5 o'clock. I came out into the lounge where Johnny was making coffee, and I literally bounced off the walls and went, oh my God, I'm back. Back! I feel amazing. My head's clear for the first time in freaking months. I'm excited about my business. I know what I need to go and work on. I know I need to go and get it done now. Johnny said, yeah, I noticed on Tuesday. Like, inside 24 hours of you putting that on, I don't think either of us had recognized just how flat, how demotivated, how worried, how unfocused, how distracted you had been through this journey. And being a woman of that age, 100% of us are going to go through this. At some point between 35 and 55, there or thereabouts, our hormone levels are going to start to drop. And yes, cool, they've talked about the physical symptoms, and there are way more than what they talk about. I think there's like 100 symptoms of perimenopause. Don't let anyone tell you that it's just about irregular periods, hot flushes, and night sweats. It is much more than that. And we need to ask for what we need. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs HRT. You absolutely need medical advice. I just want to talk to it from my experience. And my experience is it killed my confidence. It killed my ability to work on my business in the way that I know I can work on my business, to the point where I got on a call with one of my team members one day, and I love that she could tell me this, but she was like, Sarah, I'm feeling really unfocused and I'm not sure what I should be working on. Can you tell me what the focus is that we're working on? What should I be working on right now? And I was like, you know what? That's a great question, and I don't have an answer for you. And it's not you, it's me. My head has been all over the place. I have not done a good job of being a good leader. I've not been clear. I've not been focused. And that was filtering through my entire business. And I hung up that Zoom call and I put my head on the desk and I cried. I was like, I am being really disruptive to all the people I love around me, and I need to fix it. It was at that point that I really amplified my push to get what I needed. I really want to encourage you to listen to yourself. I suspect, like me, that you know yourself really well. If you're finding you've got thoughts that are intrusive, if you're finding that you just can't find words anymore, that you're losing things that you never used to lose before, that you've got brain fog, that your sleep's off the charts, bad, or there's too much of it, or there's not enough of it, that you're struggling to be nice to your husband even though he's being perfectly reasonable, he's just sitting on the couch breathing. Like, things that are, my husband pisses me off sometimes, but his breathing is normally okay. If you are seeing these things that are really impacting you from a mental point of view, and you are of the same age as me, I'm 42. I suspect these symptoms started not long after I turned 40. I really want to encourage you to get to your medical practitioner. And I want you to go in there well informed. I want you to go in there knowing that there are more than just the popular symptoms. In fact, I think the new studies that have come out have shown that those symptoms are not even the most common ones that we experience. Make sure you've got some good information about what's available to you, what you can ask for, what tests can be done. Get some good advice. There are so many cool experts out there. I haven't read the book yet, but I have been following Dr. Mary Claire Haver and her new book, The New Menopause. She's got a super cool downloadable around the empowerment guide, which talks about what are all your options, what are the old studies that showed that HRT was a really dangerous thing, and what you can do differently. I want to encourage you to trust yourself. You've been in your body for probably, most of you, 30, 40, 50 plus years. Listen to your body and your brain. You know it better than anyone else. Go and get something like the Menopause Empowerment Guide off Dr. Mary Claire Haver, that you can read up and be really well informed about what's available to us in terms of support and how you can use it. It has been a game changer for me, and I feel like I'm back to myself. I have energy again. I'm able to feel emotions, notice them, name them, regulate them, and not feel like my world is falling apart. I've got my confidence back. I'm clear about what I'm working on in my business. I'm taking action on in my business. And that feels far more normal to me than this woman who could barely get out of her car, couldn't find her keys, I was leaving my phone at the gym, like ridiculous things that I would never do, that just wasn't me. I also want to encourage you to do all the things that require that you need to look after yourself, but I was doing those things. I was making sure I was getting to bed at a reasonable time and waking up at the same time every day, but I was still having massively disruptive sleep. Like, I think I went 6 months with only 5 to 6 hours of sleep, and it was really tough. Make sure you're drinking enough water, make sure you're really well hydrated, that you're getting the right sort of nutrition, that you're exercising and moving your body, that you're taking some time for yourself, because we're not good at this. And certainly at the age and stage that we're at, I don't know about you, but I now have a daughter starting to go through puberty. We have that whole thing going on. I really want you to encourage you to do all of those things, absolutely. And I want you to go and see your medical professional and have a conversation about what other supports are out there and if they might work for you. Literally game changer for me. And if you are struggling, know that you're not alone, that there are other women in business who are going through exactly the same thing, and it's not you, and it's totally fixable. You do not have to struggle through this. You do not have to suffer through this. There are so many options for us in 2024 that will make it better. I really want to encourage you. 1, if you are seeing these symptoms, start noting down these random things that are coming up. You never know. They might just be the change. And if they are the change, you do not have to suffer through the symptoms. You do not have to be prescribed an antidepressant. Like, I was really adamant that's not what I wanted. I wanted them to do something else to deal with the symptoms, because I wasn't depressed. I was having symptoms of depression because my hormones were dropping. And I wanted to fix that. Please, know yourself, trust yourself, go and get some medical advice around this. And if they tell you that HRT is dangerous and there's all sorts of these bad things that come out of it, get a new doctor, because that is old research and there is better new research out now. They're starting to study women. Oh, all the things we could talk about around that one. Now they are actually starting to study women. We have far more evidence around what is showing up for us. And if you're running a business, you already have too much on your plate. You do not need to be navigating that with your brain offline. Like I said to my husband, it felt like somebody came in one night, stole my brain and replaced it with some dud that couldn't even find her keys, her phone, and didn't know how to regulate her emotions. Like, it was just off the charts. And literally, inside 4 days for me, those symptoms, that brain fog particularly for me, cleared. And like me, you are playing the business game. It is an intellectual game. It requires you to have your brain online. And it requires you to be able to show up confidently. And it requires you to be able to problem solve and find your words and all of these basic skills that you and I have come to rely on in our business. Do not suffer through it. Talk to your medical professional. If they tell you they can't help, or they tell you you're just busy and stressed, get a new one, because that one's rubbish. Secondly, do the basics really well. I advocate this all the time, even before I started going through perimenopause and menopause. You are the biggest asset in your business. You have to look after you first. Otherwise, everything goes to shit. You can't pour from an empty cup. Get yourself enough sleep. Get yourself enough water, some food. And lastly, give yourself some grace. You are not failing. You are doing a great job. Navigating something that is incredibly hard, that impacts every part of your life, most significantly your ability to lead your business. You are doing a great job. Go and get some support from somewhere and some good advice from somewhere so that you can get back to the, rather than, if you're anything like me, I really did feel like a complete shell of myself. Moody, tearful, forgetful, not able to focus. And I guess the other thing I really want you to take away from this is, if you're a woman of that age and you're running a business, you are not alone. If you haven't started this process yet, I think you should really be aware of this is what's potentially there for you. Some women have no symptoms at all. Some women have all physical symptoms. For me, it was incredibly mental. And all of my normal coping strategies stopped working. I was exercising twice as much. I was working out at CrossFit and swimming to try and manage my anxiety response. All of my normal tools that I could use to regulate that stuff did not work. They stopped working, and my systems and processes all fell apart, that I couldn't manage my life and my business in the same way. Don't suffer through it. Everyone has different symptoms, but if you are having those mental symptoms and you're in business, know you're not alone, and get yourself some support that you deserve. And if you want a community of women that get it, that get that process that we all have to go through, that it's an absolute normal part of the aging process, and you want a community that doesn't think you should suffer through it, come join us over at the Moxie Movement, because round here we're all about lifting you up and making sure you've got the support to navigate through whatever life throws at you, even if it is a normal aging process, because while we have to go through it, we don't have to suffer through it. And I have an entire community of women who get it. Till next time, look after yourself. Give yourself a little bit of grace if you've got any of this stuff going on, and I will see you on the next episode. Till then, stay Moxie.